This is Ryan Finkelstein, the host of Locked On Mets, coming to you from Chicago. A little bit cold out here. That is also why it'll be an audio-only show today. Still a great one as I discuss the Kodai Senga introductory press conference as the Japanese star comes stateside. I also talk a little bit about Brandon Nimmo's press conference from last week as he gets to remain a Met for the remainder of his career.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. On the show today, the New York Mets introduced Kodai Senga to the media today. Going to go through that press conference and also talk about what we can expect from the Japanese star pitcher next season. Also, in the final segment, I want to circle back to a press conference from last week. Brandon Nimmo getting reintroduced as the Mets starting center fielder, 8-year deal for him, what it means to see him get that moment and get to finish off his career in a Mets uniform. Before we get to any of that, though, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, Kodai Senga was introduced today, and it was good to see the Mets kind of unveil their star acquisition. One of them, at least, we're still waiting on Justin Verlander, but man, is it great to see the Mets, being the big spenders again, making these moves, having these press conferences, and also being back to a little more normal setting than last offseason even, and before that with the lockout and all those things and COVID the year prior. Feels like normal baseball again, and great to see Kodai Senga in person, see him stateside, get a kind of sense a little bit of his personality. It does seem like he is really relishing this opportunity. He starts off the press conference with a prepared little statement, in English, just basically saying, I'm Kodai Senga of the New York Mets. I'm excited to be here, all that good stuff. Said, let's go Mets. Gotta love that. And then we get into the questions and also Billy Epler's introduction as well, which I thought was very interesting. One of the things that I really took from that was not only the research the Mets had done on him, because I think that's obvious. I mean, I think every team in baseball tries to have, some due diligence and scouting across the board. So he said they've been scouting him for years. Good to know. And really talked about meeting him in November and how things really went from there. But he also mentioned how Kodai Senga was a developmental prospect in Japan, and it's rare that those players really have careers, much less become stars. He also spoke about how Senga won 5 championships out there and often started game 1 of those series, if not the closing games, and even did have experience early in his career pitching in big games out of the bullpen. So, this is a guy that's a winner that wanted to win and saw New York and saw the Mets as a place where he could achieve that. And it really does feel like, from everything he said in that press conference, this has been a dream of his to star on this stage. He did everything he wanted to out there, but the ultimate goal for him was always to come over here. And he also spoke about Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer a bit, how those are pitchers that everyone from over in Japan knows about. And there was an attraction there to come pitch in that staff. I think when they asked him, why did he choose the Mets? He said, well, they expressed great interest in me, and I wanted to join that veteran pitching staff. So, this is very much a free agent that chose the Mets. It's not just, let's be honest, the Mets throw $130 million at Max Scherzer, you get him to sign. Now, when Scherzer was introduced, he obviously spoke very glowingly about the Mets in the process, and I think a lot really did go into Scherzer's decision, but the money talks. And while the Mets did spend at the top end to get a Justin Verlander this year, you're starting to see the Mets not maybe have to pay such a premium to bring free agents in. There's guys that actually want to pitch in New York and pitch for this ball club. And suddenly there's this perception that's changing when you have ownership so committed to winning. Guys can really buy into the fact that, yeah, I can get paid my market value, but I can go play for what's becoming a glamour franchise in a big market that has big aspirations. And Kodai Senga is really the greatest example of that. To get him on this contract, I know there's a lot of people saying he's unproven and all that. We'll get to that in the next segment, but his market value was likely higher than $15 million a year. There was probably teams out there that would have paid him a little bit more than that, but they might not have offered him that opt-out. And so between the opportunity to pitch in New York, to play for a winner, to get that opt-out where he can prove he's a star that he thinks he is, and can have the same success and translate it here in 3 years, and then maybe test the market as one of the best starting pitchers at a young enough age still. I mean, I think the Mets really were attractive on all fronts for Kodai Senga. And from the Mets' perspective, you're getting a pitcher that wants to win a championship, that has championship experience, albeit in another league, who, I put it this way, how many pitchers on the open market this year have started a game one of a championship round? Justin Verlander? Is that it? Is that end of list? And the Mets got both of them? Granted, I'm not saying that, the MVP, playoff experience is exactly as much as, whatever playoff experience you want to have or give to, a Jacob deGrom or the other top free agents on the market. And obviously, deGrom did pitch some big playoff games for the Mets and pitched game one against the Dodgers in the NLDS. And I'm trying to remember when else he would have pitched. I know Harvey pitched game one of the World Series, and I think deGrom pitched game two based on how things lined up. But the bottom line here is this guy does have experience pitching on big stages. It's not quite the MLB stage, but people care about baseball out there, and there's a lot of people at those games. There's a lot of pressure, and the pressure does translate. So, yes, you have to wonder about, the smaller baseball there to the size of the baseball here. How is his ghost fork gonna come over? How is it all gonna look? But this is a guy that is really singularly focused, and I love seeing him have some fun in this press conference. Some questions that kind of stuck out to me. There was one where they asked him about that pitch, his legendary ghost fork, and what went into it and all that, and he just kind of wryly said practice. Who do you want to face? The Phillies lineup. A lot of really interesting responses, and all of them kind of based on that overall desire to win and also to get better. I mean, that was a big thing that Billy Appler preached, that this is a guy that really, really does work for it, that really was never kind of promised to have the success. He wasn't like a Shohei Ohtani type prospect where he was kind of one of the chosen ones out there where you knew at a young age he was going to be special. It wasn't that for him. It was a developmental process to get to the heights of being a star pitcher out there. And he's coming to the Mets with the intention to translate his success. And this was an ultimate goal for him to pitch in the big leagues, stateside here. And he wants to keep getting better. And he thinks that he can continue to get better and he can make the smoothest transition pitching in a Mets uniform. And look, he is this really high-end gamble the Mets are taking. I think at the price tag, the gamble is not as much as we thought it was going to be. But to go from a Chris Bassett to a Kodai Senga, in some respects, there's risk there. I want to get to that in just a minute. Before we do, though, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. BetOnline is always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Last time I checked, plus 900 Mets to win the World Series. If you want to jump on that, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, looking over the Mets rotation right now and comparing it to last year. I know we've done this a bunch, but just to reiterate where they went from and where they're at now, you go from Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer atop to Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer atop. Obviously, I think come playoff time, if everyone's healthy, the Mets took a slight step back, but you feel a lot better about Justin Verlander's chances of staying healthy. And the guy just pitched the lowest ERA in all of Major League Baseball and won a Cy Young. So call it a wash, whatever you want to do there. You go to 2-3-4. Last year, it was Chris Bassett, Taijuan Walker, unless you want to call Carrasco the 4, but we'll just say Bassett and Walker for the sake of an easy conversation here. You now go to Kodai Senga and Jose Quintana. I've seen a lot of people kind of question the Quintana signing and also the Senga signing. I think Quintana, you look at the history prior to last season, and it's not pretty. He really had some struggles. He was fantastic as a White Sox. He got traded to the Cubs, had like a year there that was okay, but for the most part, since that trade, just really wasn't the same pitcher. It was bounced around the league a little bit. Now, though, what he did last year, a stat that jumps out to me more than any other. You have incredible ground ball pitchers in this game like Framber Valdez, you can make an argument he's the greatest ground ball pitcher of all time. And actually, we wrote an article about that over at justbaseball.com. If you Google greatest ground ball pitcher ever, I think Framber Valdez, you'll find it. Really good stuff. You'd expect him to be the guy that leads Major League Baseball in home runs per 9. That was Jose Quintana last year. Nobody limited home runs more than Quintana, and he was pitching in Pittsburgh and St. Louis in the NL Central. Now, the NL Central doesn't have the best lineups, but they got ballparks where guys hit home runs. He had to make a lot of starts in the Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati, and Quintana kept the ball in the yard. He's got a good defense behind him. He's under a 2-year, $26 million contract, $13 million a season. That's not a lot of risk there to me to get that real depth in your rotation. You have that with him. You had that with Carrasco. You had that with Peterson. You have the upside at top with Verlander and Scherzer, and you added that final piece, which is Kodai Senga. Kodai Senga is really the great elevator for this pitching staff. I think there's a couple elevators on this roster. It's Senga, and then on the offensive side, it's the kids, right? It's Alvarez, it's Mark Vientos, it's Brett Beatty, even an outside chance of a Ronnie Mauricio. Those are the guys that are little X factors that could push it to another level. Kodai Senga is that on the pitching staff where he could be a sensation. He could be, Tanaka's first year over. He could be a Darvish, and he did speak about how Darvish is kind of a mentor to him that really has helped him along the way and really kind of pushed him towards the idea of really wanting to pitch in the majors. So that is that guy that if Senga is awesome, you have 3 dogs up top of your rotation that you're going to feel great about come October. Now, Chris Bassett has this very high floor. He signs with the Blue Jays, 3 years, $63 million, I believe. $21 a year. So you're paying $6 million more if you signed on to Bassett, and over a 3-year deal, $18 million more than what you're getting in Senga. But Senga's younger and has the upside, especially with that ghost fork, to really be a special strikeout pitcher in the big leagues. He has some velocity that you like, and we'll see where he's sitting in spring training. He touched one-on-one over there. He could be sitting 60, geez. He could be sitting 93, 94 in spring training, and the ghost fork could be moving less because the ball's a little bit bigger, and it might not translate, and we're looking at an entirely different conversation. But he was worth that risk. He was worth that gamble because what he could be could take the Mets to a completely different level than really any other free agent that they could have signed at the juncture when they signed him. Because as much as you want to say, go out and get Verlander and Carlos Rodon, not realistic. And I'll tell you, as much as the Yankees, geez, man, this kid can't talk right now. Man, I'm all over the place. As much as the Yankees love their signing of Carlos Rodon, and it's 6 years, 162, that's an investment they were comfortable making from a Mets perspective, if your idea is to really keep this roster free of really long-term risk, you're just, at that point, better off keeping a DeGrom at 187 or 185 as you are signing a Rodon at 162. I mean, obviously DeGrom wants a 5-year deal with the 6-year option, which could take it to more, but the injury risk on Rodon over a 6-year deal, it was never going to happen, particularly after you already got Verlander in place. So you take him off the board, you're looking at upside from this free agent class at the time when they signed Senga, and really the only argument you could have made rather than getting him is bringing back Chris Bassett. But if you want to improve your roster from what you had last year, as much as I love Chris Bassett throughout the season, he had 2 big games he pitched in, against the Braves and against the Padres, to push the Mets into the NLDS. If he wins either of those 2 starts, the Mets at least get a long series. He lost both of those games. It didn't pitch well in either of them. And that kind of probably left a pretty bad taste in Steve Cohen's mouth and Billy Epler's mouth, maybe even Buck Showalter's mouth, to the point where you're looking at this new guy coming in from Japan who has these flashy pitches that look incredible on tape. And you think, you know what? Bring him in. You bring him into our new pitching program with the analytics that he wants to take advantage of. And you look at this as a project where, hey, if this goes right with Kodai Senga, the Mets rotation can be very scary. So, love to see him introduced today. Was happy with everything that I heard across the board. And just looking forward to seeing what this guy actually is once we get to real baseball in spring training. Because right now, again, if I was to try to dissect his arsenal, I'm going off very limited information. But what we do know is he has 2 pitches that should play in the fastball and the ghost fork. He has a slider that he can manipulate. It's kind of a slider and a cutter. He can throw it a little bit harder, throw it a little bit softer. That gives him a potential 4-pitch mix. If he can, and also you got to remember, there's a lot of good, sliders that have come through the Mets over the past year here. You got Edwin Diaz and Jacob deGrom. You had Adam Ottavino last season, and Diaz is still in place. And Diaz also reached out to Kodai Senga. It was the one name that Senga mentioned when it comes to have you talk to any of your teammates. If they can get that slider up to snuff there, where he can have 3 real weapons, he can make a lot of noise this season. So we'll see what happens here, but I think that this is a guy that you should really be excited about, and we'll just have to wait to actually get to watch him pitch. But good first day, I guess, with the Mets. Now, a guy who spent a lot of days with the Mets, we're going to close the show on. I finally got around to watching Brandon Nimmo's introductory press conference. I also saw an interview he did with I think it's the Mets Up podcast from, I think it is a Mets podcast. With James Shiano did the interview. I want to go over some of the things I heard from all of that as well. We'll get to that in just a minute. But first, another word from our sponsors. Brandon Nimmo is a lifelong Met. I did a podcast about that after the signing. A little bit emotional for me to do it. I really do appreciate Brandon Nimmo and love that he got this deal. And I do encourage you, if you haven't listened or watched it yet, to go back and take in that show, because I really did try to kind of put into context the journey that Brandon Nimmo has been on. But getting to watch him in his blue and orange suit with a blue suit with the orange tie, and see him yucking it up with Buck Showalter, the way the two of them are interacting and laughing together, and see Scott Boras and Billy up there for that presser last week. Really great to see. And some of the things that jumped out, one, Billy Epler, he mentioned that when you are committing to a player for this many years, you have to wonder, or you want to know that the investment you're making in the player is in good hands. And the Mets felt extremely confident in that with Brandon Nimmo, which is funny because I think on the surface, a national perspective would be, man, 8 years for a guy that's had as many injuries as Brandon Nimmo has had. How can you feel safe in that investment? For the Mets, they know what this guy is like behind the scenes, and they know how hard he works and how he really does try to get better. And that's something that you can't take away from Brandon Nimmo. He is a grinder that is trying to be the best baseball player he can be every single day. He absolutely loves baseball. We've seen that from day one with him. So, yeah, you feel confident giving him an 8-year deal because you know no matter what, even if the skills diminish, the guy's never going to stop trying to be better. He's not going to just be like, all right, I got my cash, I got my money, my future is set, I'm good. No, he wanted market value. He wanted to get as much money as he could because this is his profession. He deserves that. But this wasn't just about the money for Brandon Nimmo. This was about getting a chance to stay home and see it through, as he said. See the Mets win a World Series. You know, he got drafted by Sandy Alderson. He said kind of a full circle nature that he was part of this process again. And, you know, to still be with this team, to have such great ties in this organization. Yeah, it's a great day for Brandon Nimmo to continue to be a Met. And I really do think that he'll continue to get better. And I did reference that interview he did, the exclusive with James Shiano. And one of the things that I like about what they discussed is he did ask him a couple things. One, what was the first thing you spent your money on when you signed as, out of the draft, when you had the $2.1 million signing bonus? He said an iPad, but he didn't really splurge. The money was set aside. His dad told him to really not touch it too much and put that away and just focus on being a baseball player. And so an iPad was all he got, which I'm sure helped him along his journey developing as a prospect as well. Now he's talking about buying real estate and setting roots down. But I just think that when you hear Nimmo speak about his father, you understand how he was raised and how his head's, in a good place, and, really how he can continue, or just, that, as Epler was saying, the investment that the Mets made in him, it's in the person as much as the player. And Buck Showalter also said, he was raised right when you had a good mom and dad, that they trust him. They trust Brandon Nimmo. And I would too if I'm a Mets fan, that he's going to do everything he can to be the best starting center fielder and leadoff hitter that this team can have for as long as he is in those roles. So I loved all of it. Another question from that interview with James Shiano was about the walks, the running out walks, and where that came from. And he just said, growing up, his dad told him to play like his hair was on fire, and the only thing he controls is that he plays hard, and that when fans watch him play, he wants them to understand that no matter what, it's giving his absolute utmost amount of effort, and we see that, and that's why he sprints out walks, because he said, you know what, every once in a while, maybe the catcher drops the ball, it gets by him, you were able to sprint out that walk, and suddenly you could be standing on second base. Now, has that happened since Brandon Nimmo had put a Mets uniform on? I can't tell you if it has. I don't necessarily recall that instance, but it's about a mindset. It's about playing as hard as you can. It's about having that dirty jersey that he loves, and you're going to get that from Nimmo for as many games as he's available. And you look at him as an athlete, and there's really no reason that he can't be healthy moving forward. I just think it's a great deal all around. So a lot of excitement right now at the Mets with these introductory press conferences. We'll see when they do Verlander. I haven't actually checked in on that one, if that's going to be coming up soon. I imagine at some point this week before the holidays, we could see that, and I will discuss it when that press conference comes. On tomorrow's show, I'm writing an article right now for Just Baseball comparing Francisco Lindor's contract to the other contracts given out over the last 2 years for these top-tier shortstops, and I think it puts Lindor's deal in a much better light when you see some of the other money that was spent. So that's what tomorrow's show will be on, and then we'll probably close out the week with some news maybe, or whatever else the Mets end up doing. But that's going to be all for today's show. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports Today is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on around sports. We got the NFL season winding down. You got the NBA in full swing. Of course, the MLB offseason going on, NHL. so much to listen to at Locked On Sports Today. You can find it on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.